Good morning, friends. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Luis Palacios. Me and my wife recently decided that we're going to homeschool our children. And when I found out our friend Martin has been doing this for some time, I thought this would be a great opportunity to get some input and some feedback. So, good morning, Martin. How are you doing?
Good morning, Luis. I'm excited to speak with you today. This will be fun. I think hopefully I can share a few rewarding things. I think you're at a different stage of schooling than we are, but hopefully you can still find some of what I have to offer valuable.
Oh, I'm sure. Um, so, let me start in the beginning. How old are your kids?
So now my boys, I've still got two boys, and they're 13 and 16.
And how long have you been homeschooling them?
Uh, 5 years now. So I guess for the school year's almost over. So about 5 years.
And one of the things that I'm curious about is do you have a philosophy? I mean, is it self-directed? Are you unschooling? Are you following a curriculum in
Yeah.
homeschool?
So at this point, 5 years in, I would call us radical unschoolers. So
Okay.
our philosophy is, the child direct learning through and through. And how we came to this philosophy is we tried several different approaches to get started. And what I found over time that my wife also discovered was you cannot teach the kids something that they don't want to learn.
Mm.
And so by self directed, we mean we just follow their interests. We do try and drive interest by introducing ideas and encouraging things. But in terms of what they actually pick up day to day, or they execute, for example, is really truly self directed. So by that I mean, for example, reading. We worked very hard on reading for a long time, but I came to learn that for one thing, my youngest is was diagnosed with dyslexia, and he was very difficult to train to learn. I mean, to educate and help learn to read, and magically we discovered that he really started to learn to read when he had his own direction, such as he wanted to learn to play Minecraft, or he wanted to learn to play Pokemon, or he wanted to learn how to play something that I didn't understand. Suddenly he could read. And it was always self-directed. If I asked him to read or I made a big deal out of it, he really struggled because somehow the pressure made it feel different for him. So that's been our real philosophy. And then ultimately, my goal is to teach them more how to think and not what to think. And the only thing that we do consistently every day is there's one requirement, and that's they do read. Or perform at least one chapter, like every school day, from a book called Life of Fred. And so I'll just show you. It's
Yeah.
the Life of Fred. And the reason is if we read it like this one, so I'll put it a little bit closer, see if I can get it out. It's called Fractions. Well, this is written by, so really quickly, so why I like it is because it's words and pictures, which then lead to uh, actual learning from a book. So the actual steps, they'll show them the steps to do, but they have to learn individually on their own and through a book. So we can of course help them. But this actually, so just to tell you what this goes through, if they follow along in the steps, it says here after this book, there are decimals and percents, pre algebra, beginning algebra, advanced algebra, geometry, trigonometry, and calculus. So if they follow it, they can learn to do calculus on their own through a book. And the only thing that we would need to help them do is if they were actually struggling with something to get tutors or something outside of what we could help.
So you used the phrase radical unschooling, but it sounds like they do have this one task they have to complete every day. But aside from that, then is it up to them what their day looks like in terms of, you know, the the homeschool day?
Yeah, so there's, I mean, literally, I say radical unschooling, and you're right. We have two rules. The first rule is, like I said, we encourage them to do one chapter every day because that, I just feel like there is value in that. We need to be directing them something,
Sure.
um, and and this is the one thing that all they have to do is one chapter in the course of an 8 hour day. The second rule is we turn off, like, during the workday. The kids are very digitally oriented, and we're open to the digital aspects, but we turn off video gaming and basically don't use the cell phone or any of that stuff from normal work hours. And that's different for per child, but like my youngest is an early morning riser, so from like 8 to 3, it's off for him. And then my older child is more like noon to 6, or he doesn't quite get as long of hours because he operates in a different environment at 16. um, so those are the only two rules. There is digital downtime during the work week where that encourages them to think outside of their digital brain. And then we have the life of Fred. And the only thing that we ask, and I say it's a requirement, but there are lots of days where it doesn't occur, but we encourage daily application of the life of Fred just to keep a flow along. And after that, they actually have a dog walking business where we have nothing to do with that, except we help them like 3 years ago get the first ad in the little local newspaper.
Mm.
Between the two of them, they talk to the prospective clients, they negotiate prices, they keep the books, they collect the money, they schedule vacation time. I honestly have no idea of what they're doing within the business. Yet I can pull out a thing where every now and then I check the cash values. They use a Venmo account, but they've got a wad of cash sitting in and around $5,000 worth of
Wow.
dog walking business they've done, and ultimately, like, half of that will go towards a car for the 16-year-old. And and then more, to me, it's one of those life learning things where they're negotiating with each other. They're learning to speak to prospective clients. They're learning to go out and independently make sure they're achieving their goals, and they're following up with their clients. So to me, those are like the things that are very valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and I imagine there might not be a typical day, but what does a typical day, if there is such a thing, look like for you guys, during a school day, say, or
Mhm.
school day in quotes?
So a typical day, like if we're not traveling, like why we became uh, unschoolers is two things. I told you about the dyslexia and learning to
Mm-hmm.
read,
Mm-hmm.
and the reason that oh, I'm getting a little message on. Really, the reason that we had to stop. I mean, the reason that we came home was they wanted us to do just things that we found morally reprehensible to our 13-year-old in terms of forcing him through schooling. So we really decided to focus on trying to find a better way. The other thing is we came to the decision that we wanted to. Well, another thing is vaccinating.
Right.
I found at school really kind of you can get a religious exemption in Georgia, but it's really frowned upon. And school is, the only requirement, like to get in and play in school, they want you to vaccinate. And it's just one of those things that if you're going to use the government services, they're going to make their rules, and we just didn't want to play by those rules. So that's another thing. And then finally, we also love to try and travel. So the travel means to us, schooling is like going to uh, next month we're going to California, then we're going to Hawaii, and we're just going to go and see a couple different states. And we've been to 10 or 15 different states just in traveling around and trying to make events out of it. And the only limitation is time and money, and it's because we don't have those restrictions of the kids being in school. So every event we go and make it something educational, and they learn something. And so another, for example, is my 16-year-old. He and I learned to scuba dive together.
Mm.
So part of going out, we'll get a chance to scuba dive, somewhere in Hawaii.
That's great. That's
So
awesome.
we have fun and we use it as educational stuff. And that's really the philosophy. And then the final little bit I'll add is that, you got me thinking of all these different things that I do work on the trivium,
Hmm.
but only in the broadest sense of grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And I try and work very hard on simply teaching them that the grammar is the input, and to work very hard on inputting the data and understanding what what grammar is and what data, and not I don't focus on like the technical aspect of grammar yet while they're this young, meaning like if you actually go and I've got a trivia book, or several trivia books, but grammar being um, um, English grammar, that there are certain ways that you build a logical argument. That would be something that I'll ultimately leave up to them. Like I showed them the tools, but the logic of you take in the data, the logic is removing contradictions,
Hmm.
and then the rhetoric or output is being able to argue or speak about it. And those are the basic principle of what we try and drive in terms of, you know, simply being able to perform and think in that method. And there's no rules behind that. I simply use questioning, discussion, try and use those words explicitly so that they know what I'm doing.
Right.
Um, but and like I've used little class sessions where we sit down, we talk about it, or if I find a good presentation during the school day, I'll give them a presentation, and we use whiteboards, and I'll just try and introduce the ideas and ask them what they think. And so there is like dad teaching time, but that's just me sharing my ideas, and they're not really supposed to take anything out of it unless they want to talk about it and disagree, for example. And my greatest achievement are have been two things. I had one of my 16-year-old buddies tell me that Jack, my oldest, was the most honest person he's ever known. Well, that's kind of an odd compliment, and maybe, but it simply means that he wasn't afraid with his friends or even in a group setting to say what he was thinking. And just from the place where I came from, that was the most amazing thing I'd ever heard.
Sure.
And then, Jack, when he's really focused on something and he believes in something, he's out argued me several times in making a logical point. And so in my mind, those are real achievements and accomplishments to where I feel like he's building the tools to be able to succeed in life with whatever he does. And it's just dad proud to where I feel good about the little things I see him doing.
Yeah. I'm interested also in the idea of unschooling, or that, education needs to be self-directed, right? We all talk about John Taylor Gatto. For me, also John Holt, right? He wrote a couple
Yeah.
of books that for me was, um, they were very important in shaping my idea of what education might look like. So, for you guys, I imagine that means that mostly it's, hey dad, hey mom, I'm interested in this, or, you know, I wanna do this for a while. I don't know, draw or. So my question is, like, what sort of projects or interests have they expressed, in the last, I don't know, that are noteworthy in the last couple of years, or in whatever time frame you think is
Well,
interesting.
so it's so funny. We've talked about it. Rich turns out to be dyslexic, and he's a video editor. My 13-year-old,
Huh?
right this second, has a small YouTube channel, but he loves to make movies. So as soon as you and I are done, one of the tasks he's asked me to do with him today is I'm a character. I'm an ongoing character in his movie series, and what he does is he takes plush, little like Mickey dolls or his stuffed animals that he's got. Mostly it's Pokemon. So, but he writes a script, and that was one of the ways that I encouraged him to practice his writing, his handwriting, and thinking in advance and planning. Was, I would tell him that I don't know the character, so I don't know what he wants me to do. So he would write out a script for me, and when we first got going, we would write a script. But as I developed and I learned what he wanted out of the character, and he liked my sense of humor, and I do a bunch of voices for him. So he does video editing, he writes script, he has this ongoing movie. It's very immature and cute, but it's he does it consistently. He's my arty kid. There's something called Art Hub where you go on and um, it's this dad and son that they just show how to draw all these different cartoon characters, and he does that probably every day. And that's something totally, he and my wife found, but he loves it. And then he has a big tendency to go through and he writes new characters and tries to draw his own Pokemon style, set. And he's always building out some game or something. And none of them really coalesced in anything, but it's just his expression and building them out. Those are the things that typically he does in a given day. And then of course they have to go do their dog walking business. So my older son, the 16-year-old, he will typically sleep in till 11 a.m. or whatever, because mostly the dogs that he has to start working on usually start around noon. So he starts getting up in time to go do his dog walking. He'll go do the dog walking, and then he comes back, and his tendency is just to read. So that's why
Hmm.
we encourage at least reading something that will lead to math.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
you know, I do feel like there's value, and that it's important for them to learn some math.
Yeah.
So that's where the life of Fred comes in. Is and then other than that, he reads a lot of what I call, I get it. He reads what I consider to be mind candy,
Mm.
or, just trash reading where it's fiction, but he is a hyper reader. He reads a ton of it. And that's what I did as a kid. Like, I was in school, but that's all I was doing was sitting with a book open with my book inside reading. So,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm just going to trust him that that's what he needs and is good for him. And then I encourage him to think of like investing ideas and building business. I've been talking about this course, and I'd like him to get in the course. We can learn sales, but I can't force him. All I can do is encourage him, and I lead. I try to lead by example. So, for example, I think we're considering doing like a home flipping or some type of real estate business in the next couple of years where if he'll do it with me, we'll do it together as a family thing. And I would just love him and I to build some kind of business together that, maybe it's just what he does for a short while, or maybe it's something that he, oops, sorry, grows into and develops on his own. But part of homeschooling or unschooling is that we can choose to do this stuff and explore it together.
Yeah.
And if he and I build something together, for me that would be great. And that's what we're going to try and do. So that's his days, pretty much doing his job and reading, and then he waits it out and he plays video games in the evening with his buddies. I don't know what to say about it. I kind of look back at my years and pretty similar.
Yeah, no. So a couple of things are that are noteworthy, I think, or come to mind. One is that you seem to be interacting a lot with your teenage boys. I don't know how common that is. It seems like a lot of families I see, by the time the kids are teenagers, they can't stand their parents. And that's interesting to me because it's one of the things that John Taylor Gatto and others, I mean, John Holt also and others talk about, right? That the corrosive effect of schooling, compulsory schooling has on the family life, where you become enforcers of a school and the system that they don't enjoy. And anyway, and that's harmful for other reasons, right? Being locked
Yeah,
away with just kids their own age. So all of a sudden the parents seem irrelevant and clueless. So
you
that's
bring
that's
up
that's
a giant point.
that's awesome. That sounds great to me. And I look forward to. I joke with my wife. My kids are only 4 and 2, and we're still at that age where my 4-year-old thinks I'm cool. So or I'm useful, or he asks my help for stuff, and in my I always tell my wife, like, let's. I know it's kind of a hassle because we're trying to get other things done, but will come to an end, right? At some point, he's not going to want to hang out with us. But anyway, maybe there's another way. That's kind of what you're showing us.
Well, that's what I would encourage. Like there are, we're in a course together called Autonomy, you and I,
Okay.
Lewis, and there are other people that have children about your age, maybe slightly older, but in very similar. They're going through the same process and consideration. And all I say in the outcome is you just described what is probably most important to me is we're still very important in their lives, and we're not. There's nothing. We don't fight. If we have struggles, we do work them out. Meaning, sure, like the personalities are very different. My younger one does have a tendency to fight with us a little more. It's just he's got a little more independent spirit, and so we walk a little more carefully with him with the way we approach things, and but it's in consideration of a family unit. And my only worry is, I don't want failure to start. So my goal is to build independent children that will, even if we're working together and they live right next door, I do want my own house one day.
Sure. No, understood. Yeah.
My
Um,
wife sees it differently. She would love to have him here the whole time. So
um, yeah, that's funny. That seems also very, I don't know if traditional is the right word, but it seems like dads tend to be on the side of, go out there and forge your own path. And
yeah,
moms maybe have that nurturing instinct. And, oh, you can always come home.
yeah.
So I know
No.
we've got, you mentioned autonomy. I know we have a bit of autonomy probably just starting up now. So I'll just end it with one last question. And
Yes,
it's
yes.
a little open ended. So, what advice would you have for a first time homeschooler?
Uh, so it's just like what we're learning in autonomy, and what I think, from what I know about you, Luis, is try and come with an open mind. Um, I our family, we found that doing school from home is very difficult.
Sure.
Uh, unless you are a true authoritarian and you believe in enforcing something,
Right.
doing homeschooling is supposed to be, or the promise of it in my mind is a joy and sharing and, knowledge building. And so come at it with an open mind. I really like the books you're thinking about, like John Holt and John Taylor Gatto. But, that's not necessarily the right way. There are lots of programs out there. Just know, um, I would say our experience was the first year and a half, you have a lot of questions. It can be very difficult. You feel like you're not doing it right. There's fear. Just you're around a lot of people that have resources and know. My experience is, unless you break your kids, you really can only help them along a path. You cannot do anything for them. They have this amazing ability to learn things that I don't even know where they get the information. I mean, honestly, I'm not even sure that we're doing the right thing with the life of Fred. It's more for me and my wife. We feel better that we know they're getting a little tiny
Sure.
something that
Sure.
is uh, but then other than that, I'm not they have knowledge that they're interested in that I can't figure out. Like, I used to be, for example, it's so great because I used to be like the master of all the video gaming stuff where I could help them fix it all. Then Xbox, they got to the point where, Xbox is just a deep and regretful frustration for me
Mm,
personally. So when my son knows I can't figure it out, my 16-year-old, they'll both go do research and point me to the resources. Because if I've got to fix the firewall, if I've got to fix this, half the time I can't figure it out anymore, and I have zero interest. So they'll go figure it out, and then they just need me to implement it with all the passwords. And it's been great because eventually we get it done, but it's again as a unit because they know Dad loses his mind working on the Xbox.
sure.
So I guess the answer is walk lightly, friends, and be aware that it's not an easy path. It requires a lot of you as mom and dad, but it is been for us so much joy, that it's all worth it. And the only thing I would say is, you know, if you find you're frustrated using one process, be open to taking a breath, step back, and say, is this necessary? And we found, after exploring different paths, a lot of times it really just isn't. But that's just between you and your wife. I can't tell you those answers. That's the only thing that we found to discover.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Martin. Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it. I'm sure I'll be seeking you out for more input as we go in this process. Um, so yeah, have a nice morning. We'll chat with you soon.
Okay, well, thank you, Luis.